Hi, welcome back to the workshop. In the last episode we made a really great start on the neck, and in this episode I'll start preparing the fingerboard to go on it. So this fingerboard was pre-prepared when I got it, so it's already about the right thickness. It's a little bit too long and it's a little bit too wide. Now normally what I'd do is I would trim this roughly to shape before I made any other moves on it. However, in the last episode, remember, we cut this notch in the end of the neck to accommodate the adjuster wheel for the truss rod. So of course, I've lost my reference point for the centre line. I can still do it, it's just going to be a little bit more tricky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this full width until I've cut the fret slots, and then I can locate the fretboard where I need it with some pins through the fret slots, get my centre line set up there, then I can mark it and trim it down to size. So without further ado, we'll start to get a centre line on here and we'll crack on. Okay, so we'll get this set up, ready for fret slotting. So I've basically set this up on the crimson scale length jig. This is a 25.5 scale length. Just super glue masking tape set up to a centre line as always, and now it's just a case of getting it into the fret slotting jig and getting the slots cut in. Okay, so for those of you who haven't seen this slotting jig before, basically the way it works is there's a tiny little pin set up in there, and you locate the notches in the slotting jig on that pin, cut your slot, move it along to the next one, cut the slot, and then repeat that until you've gone all the way through the fretboard. Okay, we'll get the saw out and let's get cutting. Okay, so there's the fret slots done. Not a particularly long job, probably took about 10 minutes to do. At this stage the slots are pretty much just markers. They're not down to full depth yet. And once I've done the final trimming and radiusing, I'll have to go back over them and get them down to their proper depth again. But we're just fine for now. So we can take that off the template. So now we can look at getting this position properly onto the neck, get it marked out and get it trimmed down a bit. Okay, so setting this fretboard up on the neck is going to be a little bit of a challenge. I'm going to have to line up 3 reference points to make sure it's in the right position. So the first reference point is the line of the nut that I've just marked all the way around the neck. And the Second one is the centre line at the headstock end, and the third one is the centre line at the heel end. But of course we've lost all this material where the centre line would have been, so we're going to have to reference that from the bottom with a square. So first step, get this set up in the right position for the nut. So that's good, and that's centered. And the next step is to line up at the heel end. So with that double checked and clamped together, what I'm going to do now, take a drill, the 2.5mm drill bit, and I'm going to drill through 2 of these fret slots. I'm going to use 2 cocktail sticks as locating pins, so I'll have a repeatable reference for taking this fingerboard on and off that will be really, really accurate. Okay, so with that firmly pinned in position, I can just mark up around the neck. And we can get this rough trimmed. That was actually a bit of a nightmare. Couldn't see the pencil line at all against the dark wood, but we've got it somewhere near. So the next step is to get a radius on this board. Now normally I would take most of the radius down with a hand plane before finishing it off with a radius block, but I know that there's some really wild grain at one end of this fretboard, so I'm not sure I'm going to do that this time. I'm going to give it a quick flick over, see how it goes, but I've got a feeling I'll be sanding this one in, which is going to take an absolute age. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to mount it to a bigger board just so I can clamp this to the bench and stop it from moving around a little bit. Okay, so that's actually gone quite well. It's not torn out at all, which is great, but I'm not going to risk it any further, so I'll do the rest of this now with a sanding block. One thing worth mentioning is that this is actually going to be a 12-inch radius on this fingerboard. I know that's not normal for a Telecaster, but I prefer a 12-inch radius, so I'll be sticking with that this time. Okay, on to the sanding. Okay, so that took ages. I've sanded that in. I've got 60 grit on this block and 180 on the other side because I can't find any 120. But that's got the board radiused. It's looking nice, happy with it. The only problem is it's taken quite a bit of the fret slots out. So what I've done is I've set the saw up with a stop and that's set at the depth of the fret tang, and I'm just going to go back over these fret slots now and clean them back out. Okay, so they're all cleaned out nicely now, back to the depth they should be. So the next step is to get this off the board and re-establish my centre line on the front so we can start marking out for the fretboard markers. Okay, so I've just marked the centre line back in, and I've also put a little tick mark on each of the positions where I'm going to need a marker. And then I'm simply going to draw in a diagonal from the edge of the fretboard where it joins the fret slot. To find the centre where I need the marker to go. So that's them triple checked, they're all in the right place. I do get a little bit paranoid about that. So I'm just going to pop them with a awl on those marks. And I've got some finest quality mother of pearloid dot markers to go in this neck. And they're coming in at 6mm. So I'll go and find a 6mm brad point bit and we'll be up and running. And now it's just a case of using a little bit of super glue to glue the dots in. They're actually very tight at 6mm, but that's not a bad thing. Then they just need to flick over with the sanding block to flush them up. And there we have one fretboard. Now I need to put the markers in the top, but I'm going to wait until it's on the neck and I've flush trimmed this to do that, just so I'm going to get the best possible finish that I can on them. Okay, so the final step with this fretboard before we can get it glued on is to just take out the little notch at the end to accommodate the wheel for the adjuster. The first step in this is I'm just going to take it to the bandsaw and clear some of the waste out, and then I'll just set it up with a temporary fence made of some little bits of timber and run the route around it. So as usual, I've just made a little jig out of some blocks of MDF, masking tape and super glue onto the fretboard. I'm just going to take the router and trim around that template. Okay, so that's the cutout in the fingerboard done. And the wheel fits in really nicely, looks quite neat. I'll probably put a little bit of a radius around that edge once I've actually trimmed it to size properly. So now we've reached this stage, there's nothing really to do except break out the trusty tight bond and get this glued on. Okay, so I've just run a little line of masking tape over the truss rod just to keep the glue out of there. If you get too much glue in there, there's potential that you could lock the truss rod up and it won't work. So that's just a precaution to stop that from happening. So just get some tight bond on it and off we go. Okay, so that's the fingerboard glued on. I'm going to leave that overnight to dry and I'll be ready then for the next stage of the process, which is creating the neck pocket template to exactly match this neck. But I think this is as good a place as any to end this video. As always, thanks a lot for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to hit the like button, smash that subscribe button if you haven't already done so, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. See you later. Bye bye.